Episode 1 is really that it begins with you see that the object is inside the house. So you sort of see them doing things. But what they're doing, some of the things they're doing already are sort of odd. So there's a kind of sense, there's an issue around causality, which is, whether or not where's it coming from, what's kind of the problem inside this environment and who's responsible for it. I wanted to kind of keep an openness around that, and at the end of it, the Truson character, who's played by David Birkin, discovers it sort of sees something in the room, sees the object in the room, and all the rest of the family hear him scream and rush in, and then you sort of, what you see is that they all appear to be seeing something different.
What is not? I can't see is there. There it is.
Episode 2 is called Class. It's this kind of downward mobility episode, and then there are various other sort of subplots developing, like Bobby's van getting graffitied with sort of mud or shit. It's sort of with some badly spelt, sort of slightly cryptic text that appears, and that text seems to echo some bits of dialogue in a scene in the first episode. At the beginning, you see the Bobby Jobby character, who's the sort of gardener, handyman, sees the object eating the books, and then tries to relay this information to the family, who are already kind of under the influence of it. Daddy, as you see Daddy at breakfast, saying that his intention is to going on about how brilliant the pub is, and just saying what a superb institution the British pub is, and how he intends to spend the entire day down the pub and write a play.
I intend to spend the entire day down a pub. I'll mix with the locals, drink a few bevies, and write a play. Will you join me, love?
The idea, ultimately, is that it's revealed that pub is inside the house, and that something that kind of unfolds across the story is that a lot of these exterior sort of things that you would consider to be exteriors are actually interiors. There's this kind of convolution of the inside and the outside, which is also tied up with what's going on in Daddy's mind as the story develops. Essentially, episode 4 is a kind of like dustbin of scenes from later on in the story. There is about 50% of it is actually, I think, if I'm able to complete the work, about 50% of it will be in episode 4, and some of the other scenes will move to later on, because there were a few scenes that I wanted to get made within the time and budget that I had in the first instance that are kind of a bit more expository. There's a scene where Baby Doll and Daddy are sort of coming up with the idea that it's Bobby that's responsible for the problems and the books going missing, and so that he ends up being sort of crucified. Well, not literally, maybe, I don't know, I haven't kind of written all of the script yet for this, but within the story, later he is sort of erroneously identified as being the culprit and punished, and so there's a bit of dialogue that relates to that, and it's useful, I think, to get a sense of the overall story. But later those scenes might be sort of relocated a little bit.
We must plan his comeuppance.
Some of the important stuff that's happening in episode 4 as it stands at the moment is that the Truson character, played by David Birkin, it begins with him photographing birds in a tree. And the Truson character has sort of these almost supernatural powers. There's an implication that he has magical powers. And I love this character. He's like he's in the tradition of the sort of holy fool, I think. He's like a kind of idiot savant. And he can only really speak the truth. He's a sort of beautiful character. And his father, who's much more like the patriarchal daddy character, who's a kind of product of the late 60s and early 70s, is kind of a really intriguing mishmash of idea of liberalism and a kind of issues around sovereignty and family and personal freedom, and there are these kind of clashes between in his kind of personal ideology and his responsibility for his family. And you see him kind of mistreating his son Truson in many ways. He's completely unappreciative of Truson, and he appears to fetishize his other son, Faxon, who's an adopted son, who's played by Benedict Hopper. And he's much more interested in Faxon and Faxon's interest in music than he is the Truson, who apparently can fly and communicate with birds and animals.